Hi, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Systems Masterminds, an interview series that focuses on operations and customer experience leaders of iconic startups, how they set up their systems that make their companies run like clockwork. So my name is Arthur Wu. I'm co-founder of Dataland.io. For our first episode, I have the pleasure of talking with Matt Bendett, a founder and SVP of Operations at PeerSpace. PeerSpace is the leading marketplace to book venue rentals for really anything, like art shows, photo shoots, weddings, and even holiday parties. They have over 45,000 spaces on the platform across 7 countries and 3 continents. It's now in its 10th year, and the company recently celebrated 1 million bookings and $500 million in sales completed for the platform. So Matt, it's so great to have you on. Why don't you start by giving us some more of your background and what you're up to now?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Arthur. So PeerSpace has been my life for the last 10 plus years. Before that, I was working at Electronic Arts in product marketing groups, and I was in charge of the go-to-market for some of the really popular video game franchises of yesterday and today, like The Sims. Dead Space is another franchise I worked on. And I really wanted to move into startups just to have, more personal efficacy in my role. I felt like I wanted to bet on myself and I wanted to build a business that could be transformative. And PeerSpace ended up being that opportunity. I started it with my co-founder, who I actually met back at the EA days. And it was a two-sided marketplace. It still is a two-sided marketplace for all types of events, as you've mentioned. And we quickly realized all the work and complexity that goes up into building a marketplace. You need, 2 people for every single transaction. You've got to create liquidity, so you've got to have good quality supply and good demand. And you've got to keep your customers happy, and you need to continue to build for your customers, so you're continuously creating more value. The value of the ease of transaction is really what makes marketplaces powerful. And so over the years, I ran all of our operations and marketing functions at various times to make sure that we were supporting the growth of the platform and providing a great experience for all of our users. So it's been great. I did recently depart the company, and I'm starting to think about what that next move is, but super proud of what we've built at PeerSpace. It's a great company. I love the team there. I love all of our hosts, and I'm really excited to see the business continue to grow.
That's awesome. I mean, I remember even I remember telling this to you like earlier this week, but like was using PeerSpace to try to book like my own like event for like a little art show. And I'm not a professional artist, but I just wanted to get all my friends together to to be forced to look at my art. And PeerSpace was like the first place that I went to. I didn't even like really, I don't think I knew about it like before I started searching, but I think I just searched like book art venue by hour or something like that. And PeerSpace like had so many listings. And I remember going through the platform as a user, and it was just so easy for me to just see all of these venues in one spot. And within like I think a few minutes, like I had all these applications out and like venues were contacting me. It was like probably the most overwhelming step, I think, and to know that like, oh yeah, this actually was way easier than I thought. Like I feel like I don't know if that's what I feel like you have a mental model of like what you want your customer to experience, at least on the booker side. And to me, I feel like that was achieved. I was like, wow, this is just so much easier than I thought. I didn't even know it existed, like maybe like 10 minutes before I started searching on it.
One, that's the magic of good SEO, is that you can find something you're looking for and discover a really awesome product like PeerSpace. And two, yeah, we built the PeerSpace marketplace from day one. It was all about taking a process that was historically offline and fragmented, centralizing it within a platform and a UX that was easy to discover spaces, and then making it a delightful experience to transact. The vision is that you could have a super memorable moment in a space that you've never been to, and all the details come together, and it's great for both parties. The venue gets to expand their network. They of course get income from the rental of the booking, and you get access to a creative, inspiring space that you may have not been able to find before or been able to afford. So yeah, that's the magic of PeerSpace, and a good marketing engine that we spent a lot of time building.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it definitely worked. I think, I mean, I think maybe this gets us to our first question. Like now that it's been, 10 years, like that's probably an eternity in startup lifetimes, and you've already like gone through it once, which is incredible. Can you think back to any of those like sort of pivotal moments when you realized you had to overhaul some sort of operational process? Why did that happen then? And what sort of changed after you did that over?
Yeah, I have a good example for you on that. One is the whole supply side funnel of our business, particularly when you're a new venue or which we call a host, and you're onboarding your listings into the platform. So as an ops team, we take on a lot of the work for getting new users through the funnel and getting them live and making sure they're successful. We use a lot of different kinds of tools adjacent to the product to help us manage that process.
Mm,
But examples might be, okay, you're actually signing up in the platform. We need information about what your account is like and what you're trying to do, or what your venue is. We've got to manage all those leads in a CRM, and for us, we use Salesforce.
mm,
Might need BI dashboards to tell you different KPIs that help you manage your efficiency and productivity as a team. In our case, we had some offshore agents also helping us with the onboarding, so we wanted to track time to going live, time reviewed, and so forth. So anyway, lots of different tools. Zendesk, people are emailing you, oh, hey, what's going on with my listing? Or I did this, now what? Right? So that's the traditional onboarding experience. I think for a lot of marketplaces, I don't think we were unique in it being a little chaotic. But as the volume grew for the business, the time to activation got really extended. In some cases, it was taking more than
mm.
72 hours before we would reach back out to a user and say whether or not they were ready to go live. And so we know that's a really bad position to be in with a new engaged user who wants so badly to use your platform. They've signed up. They don't ideally want to wait at all to go live. We had to do a review for quality and to make sure that we were putting the best spaces out there in a timely manner. So what we did is we mapped out the process from end to end. We added a bunch of new integrations to make data flows a little bit easier in our CRM, for example. And
Mm.
at one point, we built an appendage type low code application adjacent to our own admin portal that just made it easy for all the information to be distilled in a way that an agent could quickly go through and review against key criteria whether or not the space met the requirements to go live. And so once we built all of those things out, and this was a big effort for our onboarding team for some time, we went from individual agents being able to review like 50 submissions a day to
Mm.
over 150 a day, several hundred.
Wow.
Any quality drop off too. That's the key, is we were able to move faster and we were able to do a better job. And we got our time to onboarding down to less than an hour from like almost 3 days. And so this is a key example of how periodically you need to look at these processes you've built and see if they're still serving you or if they've become really convoluted.
Mm.
And I'm just really thankful that we identified that that was a key problem, because it allowed everything to be a virtuous cycle. The listings go live faster, they're getting inquiries, and then they're like around, they're engaged to
Right.
respond to those inquiries, get their first bookings, and get paid faster, and then they're hooked on the platform and they want to continue to put more bookings through. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that the phrase that you use, like virtuous cycle, because I think not existing also clearly is like cold start, like downward spiral if that ops piece wasn't figured out as part of the bottleneck. And it sounds like the main differentiator for that really does come down to ops. Like how fast can you review that like host application and make sure it's like good quality. Just out of curiosity, like how did you guys like measure like what your notion of quality was? Like what was like a legit host?
Yeah, well, we measured things like time to responding for an individual inquiry.
Mm,
If the median response time was higher in a certain geo, then that might be one clue to us that we have unengaged supply, or we at least need to go talk to some of our supply and
mm,
reinforce how important it is to respond fast. And that correlates really highly with a booking actually going through. Is the host engaged? Are they just ready to work on a booking? So yeah, that's one good example.
I definitely felt that as like a user, like the speed at which like how fast like hosts, like real humans were actually getting back to me with like concrete proposals, like when I was like requesting to like learn more about their space. That's super cool.
Yeah, and sorry if it takes you a long time to go live, you're already possibly forgetting about why you signed up for PeerSpace, or you're not getting a good first impression at best. And we can't control how fast you're going to get an inquiry per se, but if you go live fast, then you have a chance to get the inquiry and capitalize on it. So if it takes you a long time and you lapse, and then we set you live, and maybe it takes you a long time to get your first inquiry, that's just a recipe for having a glut of poor quality supply on the marketplace. And that's something that really works against your ability to build liquidity and to build a growing, thriving market.
Sure. And I guess I'm also curious, just, taking that so like host onboarding process and getting supply ratcheted up. Did that process also still go through evolutions when you guys like add it? Because I know that, like, PeerSpace allows like all these add-ons, like, you don't have to take extra steps like as someone booking a venue to like find a different caterer or something and have that be a totally different process. I'd imagine that like a lot of, or like maybe you're evaluating a space for different types of amenities, or when you're going to a new, or like I know that PeerSpace grew a ton in like 2022, like 2023 as well, internationally. And I feel like all those things kind of mean potentially a different thing when it comes to supplier onboarding. Did that affect like that core process like at the end of the day, or was it more just like cool, like just slightly modifying like what you guys had already built at that pivotal moment?
Well, we built off of the system that we had in place for onboarding, but we had different requirements based on where we were seeing demand spikes, or as we learn more about what our customers really want to be able to book with as little friction as possible. We might add things into the onboarding flow in terms of checking for this content in the listing submission. We might, ask, let's say it's a photography space. If natural light is really important to all photographers, and it's not, but let's say it was,
Mm,
we would want to make sure we're checking for that. And if it's underrepresented, we would want to boost that up in the onboarding. And so that's a good opportunity to improve the listing quality. And we would do so with both host education and with our onboarding checks when we were looking to see
mm,
if a site should go live. For like our meeting category, you need to have tables and chairs. You need some ability for there to be AV if you're going to have a meeting and you're going to share a deck or something. And so these are things that we would add over time into our onboarding checklist, and that was all operationalized within the tool set that we had built.
gotcha. Okay, okay, cool. That makes sense. And it's also pretty fascinating to think through like how I guess like when like you're kind of inspecting and like verifying if a host is like being correct in what they're telling you or saying like, hey, like this space could also be used for XYZ purpose. And you really have to be that quality bar in the middle to be like, hey, like actually like no, we kind of need to check out what's going on here. Was that also a tough thing to do at scale across like lots of different geos? Or was that something where it's like, like the fundamental process, like, asking for photos, like just common sense, just like making sure this person is like being sensible about it. Like, is that all that's needed?
The business is repeatable mostly by geo, so it shouldn't change your process too much. But
Mm,
when you're launching a new geo, and if it's an important geo or an area where you lack high quality supply and you want to drive it up, yeah, there are slight augmentations to the process of onboarding, where you're trying to make sure that each space that comes through shows up as great as it can from a quality standpoint. And so, yeah, there would be certain times when we would actually send our own photographer out to a space to photograph it because we
mm,
thought it was so important that the photos look good if they wanted to be listed on the platform. So, yeah, things like that we do from time to time in different markets. Like when we were launching Europe, obviously, every space that we got was valuable to us to launch the Paris market for the first time, and it also sets like a beacon for what the rest of the marketplace should look like from a supply standpoint to make
mm.
sure that your initial supply looks really strong and presentable on the platform.
That makes sense. I mean, when I think about these big changes too, I feel like even in the people that you mentioned and developing that new system for supply onboarding, like there's lots of different stakeholders like that seem to be present there. It's like I could imagine you sort of building all these low code appendage, like as you put it, like yourself. I could totally see that. But I also imagine that there you mentioned all these other teams that need to be involved, like especially like the offshore team, like the folks doing the host education, but also from like who's like the Salesforce admin that's sort of going through all this. A lot of people to kind of work in to make sure these sort of solutions work. So I guess I'm curious, like obviously as a founder, like you set the bar for what relationships look like between your different teams. But when you think about the relationship between the ops team, the product team, eng team, like all the teams I get to work with to kind of get like a business outcome done, I'm just curious, like how does that work like at PeerSpace in terms of that like collaboration like running smoothly?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you an example of how the ops teams work with product. Obviously, in a tech forward marketplace, the product is crucial. It's key, but it's tricky to work with product. I'll give you some examples, and it really takes trust and understanding between the leaders of the product org and the operations org, and at the highest levels down. And that's a muscle that you have to build within your organization, or you will struggle to do things that appropriately serve the customer. So for PeerSpace, the ops teams, like customer service, customer experience, we call it, and on the supply onboarding side, become the voice of the customer de facto because they are hearing all the feedback, they're seeing the struggles with the product on a day-to-day basis. What will happen is tickets will come in, the ops team's going to hear about the customer issues, they're going to work with the product team to prioritize them, but then the product team has a lot of other customers as well. And so when they can engage with ops, they might want to size the benefit of fixing said customer issue over their own streams, which might be something growth oriented that they're working on, a UX exercise, or even refactoring that dev is working on. So that can tend to make teams work in silos over time if you're not figuring out the right way to engage with the team and get on the same page up front. You end up having ops teams doing things like testing in a vacuum, um, building something new and adjacent to the product that really should be a product feature. And
Interesting.
if it's unchecked, it could create resentment across teams. Hey, why aren't you listening to me over here? Or, I have no resources for my needs, right? That's something that I think again is common for startups. We have a lot of needs. It's very hard to prioritize, and sometimes it's hard to say no to things.
Totally.
Particularly can really benefit your daily function. So, what's important is to get aligned with product up front, from the leaders talking to each other to the planning process and doing it really ahead of time. What we did at PeerSpace over the years is we just formalized a regular cadence of collaboration and communication that evolved to add more structure over time, where we're ultimately building OKRs together.
Mm,
We're aligning on what tests we're going to do from an ops standpoint, or which customer feedback issues we're going to hammer on a little bit more to crystallize and define. And both teams then sign up for some of that work. And when the outcomes come out, there's a post-mortem process. There's
yeah,
more of a handoff from ops to product or marketing to product because we've all been in the loop and we've like kind of collaborated on the design of what we wanted to go test. So now tests are more meaningful. The productization work gets picked up faster because there's buy-in. We all feel like we're on the same team. And so I think that's ultimately what's really important when you're working across functions with people who have competing priorities and different resources to do certain things. If you can do it right, though, it really can transform the culture of the company and create alignment between technical and non-technical functions.
I mean, I feel like I hear the story of it going poorly, like not what you guys are doing, but where it might be, I don't know, like the CX team is running like some sort of voice of the customer program, but it might be really hard for them to even distill that into something like on top of their day job, much less quantify the impact of that happening. Because, like in your case, like let's say that, the average onboarding time, like from like host to application to like onboarded host, like let's say, mentioned like that hour figure before, but what if it's like, an hour and 20 minutes now? Like, is that like enough to sort of like trigger like a work stream to like kind of go through that? Um, maybe some of these hosts are like slightly complaining a little bit more. Is that actually worth it? Like, these are all like important questions.
Yeah, very.
I know we've also talked a little bit about data, like getting a strong hold on that in order for any of this to be effective. Maybe just to that point, like I'm curious, like did you guys also have to deal with that problem where it might have just been like, to your point, like hard to prioritize something? I think that comes from it being pretty hard to estimate why we should do something. So yeah, can you speak a bit more to that, like part what that looks like for PeerSpace?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're trying to build a business case for something, you obviously need a data-driven, data-informed part of your argument to be central. And while it can be difficult to measure impact to the business sometimes it's pretty cut and dry, but yeah, it's always rooted in some kind of KPIs or measurements that you need to do. And I would say that if you're building a marketplace or really any kind of platform that users are doing things on, before you know it, you're going to have more data than you know what to do with. And
Mm,
so it's really important that you think about that and you give proper resource allocation to investing in your data pipeline, particularly from an analytical perspective, that's going to help you make key decisions. Otherwise, you're just going to beat your head against a wall. You're going to be pretty indecisive. You may lack conviction about whether this is the right thing or not in ways that you otherwise would feel more grounded in if you had the right data set up.
mm,
For us, it's really important to have analytics warehoused in the right tables with a core data pipeline that allows you to easily analyze and query things that can help you make decisions about the business. And so there's lots of messy tables. When you have a lot of data, you actually really need a table that's quantifying it and calculating some of these different data points into something that you can actually look at as an analyst. So for us, it's good to figure out what those are, to have clean data and a home base to pipe in data from all other sources as well. So, you've got
I hear
your
you.
your Zendesk or your customer service data. Maybe you want to have that in the same place as other user performance metrics because you're going to start to crunch those numbers together. And that's how you get to good insights. Another thing that's really important as part of that is having really good schema in
Yeah.
your analytics tables and documentation around it. I think data engineering or data science or your analysts it's important to keep that up so everybody who works with data understands what it is they're looking at. You can easily make the wrong conclusion if you think you're querying something that you're not. And so yeah, when you're starting to get traction and you want to ask these questions, it's really important that you're keeping a good data house that's well organized and that's piping in data and kind of flattening out those different sources so that you can quickly do your own analysis from it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think like I'm actually curious for your opinion on this. When you think about like data teams tend to be kind of this like small but like hopefully like elite team at startups because there's so much that you can do with it. There's a temptation to do like a boil the ocean approach, which is really tough versus just being really methodical about how you use data, especially at a marketplace. And so I'm curious, like there's a couple different setups. I think like one is like like data can be seen as like this like support team, which basically is like one centralized data team. Like finance goes to them, like ops goes to them, like product goes to them for metrics. And there's another version of that where, of course, you might have like maybe a couple like centralized data engineers that like maybe govern like what all these data models look like, but it's a lot more dispersed. And there might be like a data analyst for each one of these functional teams. This is a pretty hot topic, I feel like, especially in the data community of how you decide to set this up. What did that look like for you guys?
Really good question. It is a hot topic. It's hard to, there's many different possibilities for how you want to do data at a company, from the data eng side to data science to data analytics, and where these different functions should be, if it should all be centralized or not. We've played around with pretty much a centralized structure, as well as having key data analysts that are functional business partners, or they're sitting within the biz ops team specifically, for example.
Mm.
And I think with a marketplace, it's really critical to have somebody in a role that's like a head of marketplace type role,
Hmm.
but specifically around insights and reporting and analytics, less about the strategy and execution of what tests to run, but you need to be able to know what's happening in your marketplace at a geographic level or at a functional level, and distill those insights out to the org so that they can figure out what needs to be done. And so, it's very hard to recruit the right person, but this person is super valuable to the business, and they need a mix of strong data chops. They need a curiosity about the business and the ability to distill what they might be doing in like a strategy consulting type role into something that they're going to query and ideally build BI behind, so it's easy to actually see these insights and share them with other people. I think, since we're talking about BI, it's important to make sure you know how to, view the data after you've crunched it, so you can clearly see insights. We've looked over so many different analytics tables where we're like, I don't know if this is what this is really telling me. And sometimes it's just because they haven't figured out the right way to distill the information or to display it for
Hmm.
us to be able to see results in. So I would just say, like with analytics, it's really important, for all businesses, especially so in marketplaces, that you spend the extra time and resources to figure out how you're going to look at, share, you know, create insights. It's just like the basis for every functional team to know how the business is performing and the health of the marketplace. And if you don't have a strong leader that's kind of guiding that, it's going to be difficult. You may not have the luxury to build a robust data team and analytics team when you're, still trying to get traction and get to product market fit. I think it becomes really important, though, when you want to get into growth and expansion mode, to
Hmm.
be able to distill some of the key things, because every day you're going to have a new data related question. And if you don't have some core data tables to be able to analyze, it's going to be hard at PeerSpace, and maybe this is the case in other companies as well. Strategic leaders and ops and managers, you just gradually become good at querying. You have to learn a little bit of SQL. Yes, you can export data and work in Excel if you want, but I find that at some point people advance in their careers because they have the ability to get answers to their questions without waiting for a data engineer, or maybe one analyst that they have to be able to answer these things. And that happens as well, and that's kind of more of the organic process. But certainly I'd say, like, if you raise around and you want to go into growth mode, you should think about what the data related needs are going to be for your business, and make sure those are staffed appropriately and have the right
Hmm.
people in place, because it's key. It's key for understanding if your business is on the right track or not.
I know that one thing that you and I talked about a little bit before was even for the photos example, like photos getting better or worse is like is definitely like that's a pretty unstructured data point that you could make structured if you had something like AI. And this probably I think that's the first time I said AI in this podcast, which is shocking.
Yeah, made it
But
a
I
long
am
way.
curious. Yeah. I'm curious, how has the introduction of AI changed the way that you guys handle daily operations at PeerSpace in the past few years? And also, what are kind of the opportunities that really excite you about what's next for it?
Yeah, man, everybody thinks they need a chatbot, don't they? I was reading a post recently from the COO of Rippling, Matt McInnes, and he said something to the effect of like, yeah, sorry we can't get around to building you a chatbot. We're busy making something actually useful. And that resonated a lot with me because that's the first place everybody goes when they think about how they can use AI and specifically the LLMs in their communication suite. But we found lots of things that were opportunities to advance the business that are really like under the hood. A customer would probably never know that we've implemented these things. And I think a lot of businesses, the smartest ones, are the ones that are using AI to help them create better value for the end user, but not in a direct way. So, we invested resources early on in evaluating what those things were and what the most practical uses were. We would do hackathons that were AI related to advance our thinking in this areas. So some of
That's really
the
cool. Wow.
yeah, yeah, just to like take you out of your day to day and let's think about, you know, what AI tools could work at the intersection of, what the product is. And so I think that's something that most businesses should do if they're not, particularly if they don't have like a dedicated czar of AI or an AI within the team. Um, I don't know, some examples without giving away too much information is, content moderation, like you mentioned, the structuring of unstructured data. So there's lots of content that is difficult to put into structured data or requires the user to do a bunch of arduous tasks to help us learn more, build the metadata for their listing, for example, that might help with matchmaking. We can really advance on that by creating new metadata based on, inferred behaviors or content that is unstructured. These things are really up leveling um, our ability to build a high value marketplace in certain respects. I think there's on the content moderation side, there's new easier ways for us to be able to police the marketplace to make sure that it's a safe one, make sure that the users are following community guidelines or whatever. So yeah, I think those are the places that are the like highest value and low hanging fruit opportunities rather than, really trying to change the dynamic of, how a user wants to communicate with a product or,
Oh, for
someone
sure.
using a chatbot for today.
Cool. So Matt, I feel like that we're kind of coming up like close on time. I feel like I'm gonna ask you that question now that you spent 10 years at PeerSpace and sort of moving on. Is there any advice you would give back to yourself 10 years ago when you were thinking about how to think about ops systems and setting up, this big machine that just needs to, hum and work at scale? Any advice you would give yourself back then, like just starting out?
Yeah, I this is a really good question. I think it starts with one, having people around you that have seen your stage before and can help you at least like be a sort of independent sparring partner. They may have really prescriptive, hey, this is what you need to do, or they might just help you in a better situation, help you work through your problem without as much context as you have to see if that helps you see what you're doing in process land in a new light. I think it's really easy in a silo or in a small company for you to overcomplicate your processes or to think you're doing something the right way. And it's actually going to create some other headache for you or someone else. So having like a good network of
Yeah.
mentors and advisors and people who can help you when it comes to building up processes at an early stage is helpful, and I think would have been even more helpful to me. And I think that one of the main takeaways that I learned through the process is that you don't need to over architect your processes. Start small. Start with the problem and what you can reasonably get to solve it in a way that's going to take care of where you're seeing the biggest choke points or the biggest amount of feedback coming in from users or whatever, and build your what you need to solve those problems first. And then it's like a platform, so you're constantly building out your processes and evolving them, like we've talked before. But if you set a good foundation, it just needs to be 0 to 1. It just needs to be
Yeah.
something that helps you follow a process. So the more reps you get on it, the more you're able to do it without as much stress. And as you get more resources or more time, then you're starting to hit more of the corner cases. And before you know it, you've got a bunch of great, flow charts and templates and macros and training documents on how to keep the process moving with scale, with software, with tools. And so, yeah, I would say don't try to overcomplicate it or think your job as a COO, or as a head of customer experience or something is to like go boil the ocean with all these processes. I think you really need to start small and react to things as they emerge. And if your business is taking off really fast, okay, cool, that's a good sign. Go hire some people to help you build the processes faster if that's what you need.
Totally. I think like one thing, kind of a reading between the lines, I think like one of the themes that you hit on today that I didn't expect to cover was um, really it's like, well, we talked a lot about like data, we talked about like tools, we talked about like stuff like that. But I think the other theme was just that you also, I feel like you really made it your responsibility to set up like the meta ops system of people talking with each other and the right way and the right framework at the right cadence like such that whatever problem XYZ, like alpha, beta, like whatever pops up, like that group, that setup of people, the data that you have, like makes any sort of one of these arbitrary problems like solvable. Like I feel like that was almost like the meta goal that you had, like over like the past like maybe especially even the past few years, like now that you guys have hit like such scale. So just wanted to comment that that's like I think that's something really special. That's like kind of like the ultimate boss of being like head of ops, like CEO type person.
Yeah. Well, thank you for acknowledging that. Honestly, you are right. Like we built our company's values in such a way that collaboration is important, that hard work and low ego is important, and that we're making sound strategic decisions, which largely requires you to rely on data for a lot of what you're trying to do. And if you construct the operating system by which your business does the day to day and the values that reinforce how you show up every day and why you're there, it can make working through these tactical challenges a lot easier and feel more organic and less cumbersome or stifling to be able to do. And so, yeah, I actually didn't really think about that, but it all does stem from, the mission, vision, values, and operating system that you implement in your company.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing the wisdom today, Matt, across all these questions. I think that's it for the interview. So, Matt Bendett, you are a system mastermind. We can't wait to see what you do next. So, thanks for being on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Arthur.